Audrey Hepburn. The role you're going to remember whenever you are alone.
During the last 8 minutes of this picture, the theater will be darkened to the legal limit to heighten the terror of the breathtaking climax which takes place in nearly total darkness on the screen. If there are sections where smoking is permitted, those patrons are respectfully requested not to jar the effect by lighting up during this sequence. And of course, no one will be seated at this time.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1967 thriller Wait Until Dark. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Nick for requesting this review. If there's another film that you'd like to see me tackle in the future, or a TV show, or a topic, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, Wait Until Dark is one of those movies that I was aware of, but I never really got around to watching until recently. And I gotta be honest, I thought it was just okay. This is a film that has a lot of critical acclaim. It's on a lot of people's best lists when it comes to thrillers or horror films. Stephen King even ranked this, I think, at the top of his personal list of scariest movies. And or best horror films, and I just don't get it. I don't think it's that great. I think it suffers from some pacing issues that really do make it move along at a pretty glacial pace. I think it doesn't help that I'm not really that invested in the characters. I was more intrigued and captivated by the home invaders than I really was by the lead, uh, the blind woman who is having to fend off these intruders, Susie. And it's also one of those films that is adapted from a stage play, and that was something that was really obvious. And I honestly feel it was to the detriment of this movie that they really stood, not necessarily stood, but they stuck with the structure of the stage play. They didn't deviate from it that much. And I can understand why they did that, because it was a popular play, but at the same time, this is cinema, this is a feature film. I don't think the same blocking and the same structure when it comes to the plot is really as effective when you just copy and paste it from a stage play. It's one of those things where it definitely does make the film move along at a much slower pace. And because of the fact that it's based on a stage play, it's a much more talky film. So a lot of the film is relegated to these really long sequences of dialogue. And if you don't find those sequences really that interesting, then it can be a pretty dull film. That being said, it has some genuine moments of tension, and um, it really does shred your nerves at times, especially near the end. But that doesn't mean that as a whole it's a spectacular, great movie for me. Uh, it's directed by Terence Young, who I felt for the most part he did a good job. The film looked pretty slick and stylish. The film is at its best in the climax when it's working around the limitations of the set, and using darkness as a way to really immerse the audience in the situation that Susie is in this moment of dire survival. But The other shots are just kind of there. But for the most part, though, it's got a nice style to it. It's the direction is it's solid. I'm not gonna say the direction is really a low light by any means. It's definitely one of the positives when it comes to this film. The screenplay by Robert Carrington and Jane Howard Carrington, that's where the film kind of falters for me. Like I said, I don't really get that invested in this story. I think it has to do a lot with these characters. Susie seems like a sweet gal, but there's really not much to this character other than the fact that she's sweet and she's blind. And it's like, okay, all right. It would have been nice to have had more development with her character, more backstory, a little bit more to her, so you get to know her on a deeper, more resonant level. The villains, they're written in ways where they are deliciously devilish. They are definitely well written. I would say the villains, Tallman, Carlino, and Rote are instances of the best writing. And like I said, I do like how they incorporate darkness in the climax and how Susie uses her wits to outsmart the bad guys, the home intruders. But the whole idea about this game of cat and mouse with this doll that has drugs in it, it just, I don't know, it just didn't really wind up being a plot that I found to be that intriguing or that consistently compelling. And then you have the character who's your lead, who I find kind of dull and boring, and then it just makes for a film that just kind of meanders and wanders around, and you're just waiting for something to happen. Not a lot really does happen in this film. There's a few moments here and there where the uh, criminals are tricking Susie. And I like that bit where Rote would put on disguises and run back and forth and uh, try to pull the wool over her eyes. And you really don't get to any suspense or thrills until the climax. So the fact that this is being labeled as a horror film by a lot of people, I think is a massive stretch. This is not a horror movie. This is a thriller. This is not a horror film. The if this is a horror film, then so is Panic Room. Uh, so and speaking of something like Panic Room, I like that more than Wait Until Dark. So yeah, the script it's adequate enough. I just feel that there's a lot of things that it lacks. Character developments, for one, a reason to really give a shit about what's going on. Uh, I didn't really care most of the time, and that's never a good thing when it comes to a movie. And it's got a nice cast. I mean, Audrey Hepburn is Susie, the lead. And Audrey, she definitely did put a lot into this role. She did a lot of preparation. She worked with blind people in order to prepare for this. She learned Braille. And for the most part, it does pay off. I think she does play a rather convincing blind woman in this. But I think it's because of the fact that around this time, a certain style of acting was considered the norm and was considered something that was more desirable. And because of that, her performance to me comes across as a little too theatrical. And by too theatrical, I mean it comes across like someone who is overly emoting at times, and hamming it up for the audience in order to get a lot of emotions across. But that's the kind of style of acting that was more the norm with stage plays. And around this time with films, it was also the norm with movies. So I'm not going to say that it's a bad performance. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't really care for these kind of overly theatrical performances from actors or actresses from this era. I prefer more natural method acting or some other form of acting that isn't some interpretation of stage acting, or what actors used to do when they were working on silent films. A lot of that still was kind of uh, really popular around this time. So you have a lot of acting that's just too dramatic. It's just it's melodramatic, and to me it just comes across as kind of comical. I mean, there's some moments in this film where Audrey is supposed to be acting as if she's scared or she's in a frenzy or she's anxious and or sad, and it just comes across as really corny to me. And I'm not going to sit here and say otherwise. I guess she got nominated for an Oscar for this. I don't really know why. I don't think it's an Oscar worthy performance by any means. Uh, Alan Arkin, though, he was amazing. He was really good as Rote. One of his best performances. And you could tell that he loved playing this role. He was talking about how easy it was for him to get this role because no one really wanted to be the guy who was going to be stalking and trying to kill Audrey Hepburn. So it was really easy for him to get this role. Richard Crenna, a Troutman from First Blood and the Rambo films, he's in this as one of the members of this gang led by Rote. Rote initially is a guy who was, I think he was considering working alone, but then he had to bring in Tallman and Hendricks because he needed their help. And Crenna and Zimbalist Jr., who plays Hendrix, plus Arkin, they all had some really good chemistry. They played a good gang of villains, bad guys, foils for Susie to try to stay one step ahead of. Uh, Jack Weston plays this guy named Carlino. Uh, who is yeah, actually Efrem Zimbalist Jr. is Sam Hendricks, who is the boyfriend of Audrey Hepburn's character. Sorry, I got the two actors mixed up. I apologize. So it's Jack Weston who plays Carlino. So it's Carlino, Tallman, and Rote. Then you also have Julie Herrod, who plays a character named Gloria. This girl who's, it seems like she's house sitting at times, or she's there to help Susie. Like she comes in every now and then to help her get groceries, and she becomes involved in the climax as she becomes someone who helps Susie figure things out and be her eyes on the outside. So yeah, for the most part, the cast is pretty good. I mean, like I said, I think Audrey Hepburn's hamming it up a little bit too much for my tastes, but it's definitely a film that is worth watching for Alan Arkin and Richard Crenna and Jack Weston. The film features some pretty nice looking cinematography by Charles Lang. The editing I thought was fine by Gene Milford. I liked the score by Henry Mancini. I thought it was very mysterious, very quirky. I feel it fit the film rather well. And like I said, it's a film that is paced rather slow. I don't mind slow burn thrillers. In fact, I like a lot of them. But this just didn't work that well for me because I just didn't get invested that much in this story and in a lot of the characters, except for the villains, the home invaders. Uh, I can see why the film really did shock a lot of audiences back in the day. I could see why this is a movie that, when it got to the climax, it scared the absolute living shit out of people, because that's not something that was very common back then, this kind of nerve-shredding climax. And I will give the film credit for that. The finale is honestly pretty fantastic. It's in terms of the performances by the cast, and the direction and the editing and the cinematography, the music, like everything about that finale is the stuff that great thrillers are made out of. But the stuff leading up to it is just mediocre to me. So that's why I just feel the film at the end of the day is a mediocre movie. The fact that it's called Wait Until Dark is rather fitting, because you're just waiting for something to happen most of the time, and you're waiting for the climax that takes place for the most part in the dark. And I'm just surprised this hasn't been remade. And I know the reason for that is probably because there's been so many home invasion movies of this type that have been released over the years. But it's a well known enough title that it just seems like a film that would have already been remade by now. And honestly, I'd be curious to see a remake with a new vision, a new perspective, a more modern take on things, even though it would be yet another home invasion movie. I think if it was done well and they did a good job building the characters, I think it could be a good film. And also, if the direction was very dynamic and unique in terms of the angles or the perspectives. There's a lot of things directing wise that you can do now that you really were not able to do back in 1967. So there's that, and then of course there's also the different style of acting that would be nice to see when it comes to two different actors' interpretations of Susie or Rote or some of the other members of this gang of home invaders. But yeah, I think I remember reading something somewhere where it was considered, but then it never really happened. And I guess a lot of people find this to be such a beloved classic that it would be one of those where they think it would be blasphemy for it to be for it to have a remake. But I'm not one of those people, so I honestly would be interested in another take, another vision of Wait Until Dark. But until that time, I guess I'm just gonna have to wait. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I would say if it's a film that does interest you in any way, and you like the trailer, and you're a fan of these thrillers from this era of filmmaking, then I definitely do recommend it, because I think you might ultimately appreciate it or like it a lot more than I did. But yeah, it's one of those movies where I definitely didn't love it. I didn't think it was a great film, but it was worth at least one watch. It was all right. It was an all right thriller. But anyway, thanks for watching my opinion and watching my review. And as always, I'll see you later.